Here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Going to start off with the much anticipated, much awaited profit margins of our big oil companies. Yes, today I want to start with Exxon and Chevron, who have reported, yes, thanks to your sacrifice, thanks to your paying higher prices, they've got record profits. And who knew? Who could have possibly known that by you paying higher gas prices that they would reap record profits? In fact, Exxon, they themselves, the big boy, they've reported an income of $17.9 billion with a B for the months April, May, and June. That is more than 3 times what they pocketed a year ago. And thank you so much for ensuring that their bottom line is healthy. Now understand, their revenue jumped up to, during that same period of time, $115.6 billion, up from 67.7. And why is that? Well, it's because you tighten the belt. You paid those extra prices. You paid that inflated gas price, and they are now reaping the benefits. Chevron, same kind of scenario. Record profits, saw theirs more than triple. $11.6 billion for the months of April, May, and June on sales that were $65 billion, up from $36 billion just a year ago. And you go, how's that possible? How's it possible that they have these massive prices, these massive profits? How's that possible? Well, it's because you've been paying it. You've been squeezing the quarter till the eagle screams. Skimping on some other things so you can keep the tank full, and their profits well healed, and they're grateful for it. And what are they going to do with that? What are they going to do? What are they going to do to show their appreciation? What are they going to do with all of this windfall money, these billions in profit that you have so graciously handed over to them? What are they going to do with it? Well, they're going to do what they always do. They're going to further enrich themselves. Exxon, which spent $6 billion on stock buybacks in the first half of the year, they said that they plan on, I'm not making this up, they plan on buying $30 billion in buybacks over the next year and a half. That has tripled from just a few months ago. And why? Well, it's because we're keeping those prices up there for them, making sure that they're well healed. And again, thank you, Chevron. They spent about $4 billion on buying back their own shares in the first half of this year. They've upped their limit as well to $15 billion. So they're going to continue to buy back. And you go, well, why? Why? Well, because they don't know what else to do with all of the money that we're giving them. Shell last week said that they're going to repurchase about $6 billion of theirs. And we talked last week about the fact that record profit for them too. We're still waiting for BP and Total and a couple of the other big folks to announce their numbers, but we're expecting the same thing. Massive profits. Now you go, but Rick, shouldn't they be taking these massive profits and kind of reinvesting it and expanding their production and doing that stuff? Oh, silly people. That's old school thinking. New school thinking is enrich yourself, limit supply, get people blaming someone else. Like there's a guy in the White House. What's his name again? Oh yeah, Joe Biden. We could blame Joe Biden for the high prices, and dumb people will slap stickers on things and go, he did this, without understanding that these oil companies robbing us blind. And not just robbing us blind because they can, but structurally robbing us blind. And I was reading through the article over the New York Times today, And what they were talking about was really kind of interesting, because now look, they were going, Exxon and Chevron, they expected the profits to be high, but the profits that they reported even blew the expectations out of the water. They made even more than the enormous amounts that people were expecting. That's how out of control this is. Now, what I found interesting is when they started talking about, why this is and what's going on, this framing that this expert brought out. He said that shareholders are demanding that the companies not overspend on expansion. That the shareholders, the handful of institutional shareholders who are making huge money off this, and when they buy back all these shares, get their bottom line fed. The wealth class, the ivory tower folks are saying, that production stuff, that's so 20th century. What we need capital spending discipline. Grow production at a meager rate, 1% to 3%, even though demand is going through the roof. But we want an increased cash return to the shareholders. It's about us. This is where, again, if you go back to August 19th, 2019, when the Business Roundtable had their epiphany, where they said, hey, we no longer, are focused solely on maximizing shareholder wealth. No, we've seen the light. We have seen the light. And the light says we care about communities. We care about customers. And most laughably, we care about workers. And then we went through a little pandemic where they proved that they didn't care about any of this. But stock buybacks, this makes those folks happy. So what they're saying is, no, we're not going to increase production, and because we like things where they are, because it's going to return us massive dividends. If you keep production at a lower rate, we can charge a higher price for it. It's basic supply and demand. We learned this back in Econ 101. And you've got a scapegoat. You got Joe Biden. And you've got the Democrats who are saying, look, we need to get off of this stuff. We need to get away from dirty oil. We need alternatives. We need clean energy. So it's a natural scapegoat. So the simple go, it's Joe Biden. That's where we end up going. And this is the infuriating part about this, because they've had leases, they've had opportunities, massive opportunities. And they've chosen to go this route. Now, to me, this is another one of those examples. We've given these corporations massive amounts of tax breaks. We've given them opportunities to invest in their companies. We've given them all this stuff. And what do? They enrich themselves. And this is where I keep coming back to. We've got to stop giving these companies all of these tax breaks. Return to the good old days of the socialist president, Dwight David Eisenhower, where we were taxing corporate America at around 52%. And what happened during that time? You had higher wages, you had better investment rates, because they used that money more efficiently into their business, other than, hey, I just want to make myself richer. But the thing is, and we've been sold on this idea that, if tax breaks are good. And look, depends on who you're giving tax breaks to. You give a tax break to a working person that puts money into their pocket, they're going to go to the local store and they're going to buy eggs and milk, and they're going to buy shoes for the kids, and they're going to buy things that the local economy creates and benefits from. There's going to be a reverberation effect. When we give tax breaks to corporate America, they buy their stocks back and they make themselves wealthier. Seems simple. And it seems where we have ended up. Let's go to the phone lines. We've got Calvin from Illinois on line one. Calvin, how are we doing today?
Busy. Can you give us a brief lecture on how would we start to put into action the excess profits tax? Nobody seems to be talking about it much.
No, it's something we absolutely have to do, and I think we go back to what I just said a second ago. The good the good socialist president Dwight David Eisenhower, and I say that in a facetious manner. Obviously, Ike was not a socialist, but in today's frame, a top tax rate of 92% on the wealthy and a corporate tax of 52% would seem like, oh my gosh, total socialism. But it made our economy much better. And I argue that we need to go back to taxing some of these people who are just making themselves wealthier. These tax breaks aren't doing what they were supposed to do. They're not trickling down. They're not making wages better. They're not making conditions better. They're not being reinvested. They're not increasing production. They're not doing anything. These stock buybacks are telling us one thing. They have no idea what to do with this money other than to buy their shares back and make themselves wealthier. That's what we need to be doing, Calvin.
Oh, but the process, can Biden do it by himself? If not, does it start in the House as if it were a new bill, or what?
Well, this has already begun. I mean, you've got Elizabeth Warren, who's been calling for this for quite some time. She's been saying for a while.
Is there any action happening, Rick?
Come again?
Is there any action being taken after their speeches and so forth?
No, because we got a 50-50 Senate. I mean, the reality is you're not, unless you can get to the magic number of 50 on a reconciliation bill, which we can't do because of Sinema and Manchin, which is why elections matter. We get 3 more senators who are willing to say, hey, we need to be taxing corporate America. We can make Manchin and Sinema irrelevant. Then you can move some stuff along. Until then,
that's what my poster said 3 weeks ago. 53 or 54 senators after November 8th. But has Biden got the guts to do it, even when he's got the votes in the Senate?
I think you put it on his desk. I think he signs it.
Uh-huh.
That's my answer to that.
I sure hope we can last until the 9th of November.
I hope people get out and vote. I hope you're registered. I hope you're ready to get out there and vote. And I hope the young people, the polling says they are.
Saturday and Sunday with my new poster weekly.
There you go. That's what I love to hear. Great stuff,
right,
buddy. Appreciate
bye-bye.
it. Thanks so much. No, look, there are bills out there. Windfall profits taxes. There are things out there that would say, look, look at the pandemic. You saw the wealth of the ultra wealthy in this country just explode. A couple of $1 trillion in wealth in the hands of a few, while the vast majority of folks at the bottom, the working class of this country, struggled. We need to have a sane conversation about taxation. And I know my right-wing friends will go, but you're talking about redistribution of wealth. And I go, yes, I am. I'm talking about redistributing it in a way, well, in the way that my grandparents would have redistributed it. In a way where the more you have, the more that is expected of you. You go back to a time, and I look back to those. I ask people, when was the country great? Most of my MAGA friends, 1950s, the golden 50s, the fabulous 50s. And you go with the tax rate at 92% on the rich folks, with the 52% corporate tax rate, with the basically free education as far as your talents will take you. Yeah. With the massive investments in public infrastructure. Oh, yeah, that was fabulous. How do you think with the healthcare, the hospitals owned by communities and not by private interests? Oh, yeah, that was great. How do you think that happened? It happened because, well, we taxed rich people. Now, did they pay 92%? No, but they paid 70%. They paid 65%. Which is a whole lot more than the zero that some of our rich people pay. And now look, I'm not anti-rich. I want people to be wealthy. I want people to do well. I want corporate America to do well. I say it all the time. The company I work for, I want them to do fabulously well so that come contract negotiation times, when we sit down and renegotiate that contract, we do better. But this idea that the winning, the profits are held in the boardroom and all of the risk and the struggle and all of the costs are on the shop floor, that ain't right. And we need to be talking about how we ensure that that ideal that I grew up believing, you work hard, you play by the rules, you get ahead, that there's a reward for work, that we have a fair and just system, and that we're investing in the future of this country and not just investing in creating the largest billionaire class in history, which is what we've done. And congratulations to us. And now it's time to reap some benefits from that. At least that's my thought. Love to hear yours. 1-866-416-RICK. 1-866-416-7425. You got a thought? You got a question, comment? I want to hear it. Also, if you miss any portion of the program or any of our programs, podcast. Wherever you get yours, you'll find ours, or just go to thericksmithshow.com. It's always there, always available. You got thoughts? Also want to hear that. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Angry stuff to the top of the list. Back after this. Stick around.
If you're a fan of the show, you've heard our labor history in 2 segments, and you can hear them on the radio pretty much anywhere in the U.S. Labor history has never been more important than it is right now. So here's what we'd like you to do. Tell a teacher. Tell a teacher that labor history is important and that they can get digestible 2-minute lessons that are absolutely free. Free to download, free to use, free to share. Tell a teacher to go to thericksmithshow.com/history and help us put labor back where it belongs, in the classroom. You know, generations of American workers fought, bled, and died to build the American way of life. It's our job to keep their stories alive. Go tell a teacher that we're here to help them do just that. Find us at thericksmithshow.com/history today.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. So NBC News is saying, hey, you know, as that COVID thing is spreading, you know, as it's gotten more contagious, the subvariants are spreading rapidly. Seems most Americans, they don't care. Don't care at all. And look, you look around and I think that's been kind of the sense, you know. It's over. Now, Marjorie Trainwreck Green, evidently our president has got the COVID again, a rebound of the COVID. Trainwreck is saying she thinks that Joe Biden would benefit from some ivermectin. It's back. The mectin is back. And there's part of me that goes, I think she just wants attention. And wants someone to say, hey, look at me. Had to throw this out there to get a statement because she knew someone like me would say, yes, look at the dumb statement. But then she followed it up with something even better. She said that she would be honored to be Donald Trump's running mate. I'll be the first. Let me be one in a long line of list. I think even he's smart enough to know that she's too dumb to be on his ticket. Just kind of throwing that out there. Let's go to the phones. Got Alice on line 2. Alice, how we doing?
We're doing.
What do you think about a Trump Green ticket?
Okay, that sounds like a Saturday Night Live skit, doesn't it?
It does. It does.
I cannot even imagine. I mean, that would be a case of Beavis and Butthead or Dumb or Dumber. Take your pick, huh?
Dumb and dumbest. So what's on your mind? Go.
Tweedledum and Tweedledee. Yeah. Anyways, what I wanted to say was, you know, it appears to me that the dumbing down of the American electorate just gets worse and worse because people don't even seem to understand the basics of how the economy seems to work. I mean, I am just gobsmacked at times when people come off with things, and it's like, that falls under a corporation, not the government. And you know, we have this idea in our
You mean like
you get the government off off Medicare? You leave your government hands off my Medicare?
You mean like that?
No, I'm talking about blaming Biden for the gas prices
Oh, yeah.
and all these other things. I mean, it's just mind-boggling, and we have this idea in our head, not all of us, of course, but a majority of people go, oh, yeah, they're smart because they're rich. Oh, they're a good person because they're rich. And the two things just don't go together. A lot of the rich people are rich because they had absolutely no problem backstabbing, lying, cheating, and stealing. But we have just become such a nation of idiots. I mean, I got worried when years ago when they had, the Sally Jesse Raphael and all those other shows, and they'd all go on there and air all their laundry and get into big fights. And I thought, my God, I mean, it's just gotten worse.
No, now those people they're no longer on daytime TV. The Jerry Springers of the world and the guests of that show are no longer just on TV. Now they're in Congress.
Oh, absolutely. I agree with you 100%. Yeah, I would like for someone, for my representatives, be it in the state legislature or, my county or the federal government, to at least have a basic understanding of, things like, laws and history and the Constitution and, that sort of things. But obviously, the dumber you are, the better chance you have of getting elected.
Well, on the Republican side, which is true, and I need to amend my statement. The daytime, TV show guests, they're on the Republican side. I mean, you can go down the list of crazy on the right, and the sad reality is you look at the things that they've done or haven't done, and I look at the fact that the PACT Act hasn't passed and the justification for it is just mind-blowing to me. There are real-world painful consequences to having these caricatures of politicians in office, and I'm hoping someday we shake awake, but it hasn't happened yet.
I know. I was kind of hoping, and you know what? Let karma do whatever. But I'm at the point where it's like, really? Come on, COVID. You mean you couldn't get rid of some of those idiots for us? I mean, it might be a terrible thing to say.
That is horrible.
I don't care. I'm at that point because I am just so fed up with stupid. And the thing is, they're not just affecting themselves. They're affecting everyone with their stupid. I mean, and as you say, real life consequences.
Yeah.
For millions of people and for the whole planet, if you want to get right down to it.
No, you're not wrong. Look, I was just reading a story. My wife and I were just talking about it before the show. We're making polio great again in upstate, I guess in New York. We're in the wastewater. They've seen an uptick in polio being detected, and hey, the anti-vaxxer movement's growing. So yay, we're going to make polio great again.
Oh, I know. It's my body, my choice. As long as it's a vaccine, but not so much for a woman making a choice for her reproductive health.
There you
go.
But
there you are.
I appreciate it, Alice.
Stupid is stupid. Have a good evening.
Thanks so much. As Forrest Gump says, stupid is, stupid does. And we got a lot. She's right. Got a lot of stupid. And sometimes you just shake your head and you go, how'd we get here? Well, I would argue 30 years of right-wing rage radio, the outrage candy being fed on a daily basis. It is what it is. Love to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I'm going to take a quick break. When we come back, some thoughts on the long game. I mean, while we do talk about how Republicans can be crazy, they're also sly and, at least the moneyed interests. Playing the long game. And sadly, could be the dangerous consequences of them winning could come out. Quick break, right back after this.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1934. That was the day National Guard troops in Minneapolis raided Teamsters Local 574 headquarters. Over 150 were arrested, including top strike leaders Bill Brown and the Dunn brothers, who were imprisoned in military stockades. Troops also seized union records and files. They then raided the Central Labor Union, enforcing out dozens of area labor leaders. The Teamsters had been battling the trucking bosses and the Citizens Alliance throughout the spring and summer in what would be a turning point for industrial organizing. Finally, drivers agreed to a tentative settlement, but the bosses rejected any deal, refusing to negotiate with Reds. Farmer Labor Party Governor Floyd Olson declared martial law the next day. 4,000 troops arrived, issuing unlimited military permits to scab drivers. By month's end, over 7,500 scab trucks were rolling throughout the city. Local 574 challenged the martial law, demanding that peaceful picketing and open-air meetings be reinstated. They also wanted troops withdrawn from the city, and they wanted all truck movement halted for 48 hours. When Olson rejected these demands, a mass rally was called for the 31st to mobilize strike support. 25,000 turned out to the parade grounds cheering strike leader Bill Brown, who declared, quote, "The Farmer Labor Party is the best strike-breaking force our union has ever gone up against." Historian Brian Palmer notes, the loudest and longest applause was reserved for Albert Goldman, who thundered, quote, "If we submit without a struggle, then we deserve the fate of submissive slaves. We cannot, we dare not submit. We call upon the workers, organized and unorganized, to clench their fists, shout defiance of the bosses, and struggle until victory or death."
When a golfer hits an errant shot that might bonk an unsuspecting spectator on the head, the proper cry of warning is, "Four." But what do they shout when they hit a bad shot that boomerangs and bonks the golfer on the noggin? Actually, this shot has rarely if ever occurred, so there's been no need for a warning shout. Until now. This spring, a small group of professional golfers, led by former superstars Greg Norman and Phil Mickelson, decided to turn the game that has made them fabulously rich into an unsporting game of sleazeball. They say they want to set up an independent series of golf tournaments called LIV to compete with the PGA, the Professional Golfers Association. Fine, pro sports should be about top-quality, honest competition. But there's the rub. LIV is not honest, not a sporting competition, and not even about golf. It's entirely about money. Indeed, callous greed. The LIV scam is funded by the brutish family of petro-royals who ruthlessly rule Saudi Arabia and have made the oil-rich regime a global pariah. Mohammed bin Salman, the crown prince who is the mastermind behind this multi-billion-dollar golfing scheme, is the same fellow who ordered Washington Post journalist Jamal Khashoggi murdered in 2018. But killing wasn't enough. The prince had Khashoggi cut into small pieces, packed in suitcases, and tossed away. Now his golf gambit is a blatant case of sports washing. He is buying the marquee names of a few dozen golfers for a sports spectacle, hoping to distract attention from his government's depravity. Hitler tried this by staging the 1936 Olympics in Nazi Germany, but it didn't wash. This is Jim Hightower saying, likewise, the Saudi Golf Tour won't wash off the regime's indelible ugliness, but it will boomerang on the money-grubbing golfers selling their once-good names to it.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
It's our quote of the day from Uncle Milton Friedman. Probably one of the most dangerous people, I think, to ever walk this planet that nobody's ever heard of. He says, only a crisis, actual or perceived, produces real change. When that crisis occurs, the actions that are taken depends on the ideas that are lying around. That, I believe, is our basic function, to develop alternatives to existing policies, to keep them alive and available until the politically impossible become the politically inevitable. And look, if you can look at the right in this country and give them credit for anything, it is that. They have kept horrible ideas around for decades, so that when their wet dream finally comes true and they finally meet a girl, they finally get a chance. They've got all these ideas lying around. And here we're going to have to live through all of their fantasies, all of the things that they've concocted between their ears and have been whispering to each other. We're going to have to live through all of it. And one of them I came across was Rick Santorum attempting again, former senator from my state of Pennsylvania, to make himself relevant. This idea of we can just rewrite the Constitution. We could change the world. Now, not new. They've been dreaming, fetishizing about rewriting the Constitution, correcting the errors, going back to the original intent, making a couple key changes, going back to white landowning males, 21 voting, women back in the kitchen, gays back in the closet, and blacks back in the fields. Yes, America. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on Tricky Ricky and his fantasy, I've asked Carolyn Fiddler to come talk with us. She's the political editorial director over at Courier Newsroom, couriernewsroom.com, the website. Carolyn, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, thanks for having me. And wow, yeah, Santorum picking up one of my favorite little pet causes there. And by favorite, I mean it's actually very frightening and an abomination. He works with something called the Convention of States Project. And what that is a bunch of conservatives who really, really, really want to trigger an Article 5 constitutional convention. And the way you do that is you get a bunch of Republican-controlled state legislatures to pass resolutions calling for such a convention. They are way under the 34, 35 state threshold that they need to do it. But this movement has been around in its current form for about a decade now. And they're still trying. And I don't see them giving up because they didn't think that. I wonder if conservatives didn't really think it was possible to overturn Roe v. Wade. And now that, they got that little bite at the apple, I think they're not going to stop until the whole rotten thing is down their gullet.
No, I think this is why you're seeing the insanity rushing to the forefront. And I'm with you because all of my conservative friends prior to the leak believed as I believed that the Roberts Court would incrementally destroy Roe, that there would be another, just like the death of 1,000 paper cuts, that it would be another year and another year. It would eventually go, but it was going to be a slow, kind of the frog in the water kind of scenario, not this abrupt, we're chopping it off at the knees right away. So that when they saw that, oh my God, now everything's possible. Now every fantasy now is possible. And this is why we're seeing people like Santorum going, hey, I got a fantasy. I got a wet dream. Let's go.
I really wish these people had more interesting or more fun fantasies. Or at least fantasies that didn't impact, the entire country. And
no, this is what repression gets you.
We don't want any of this.
This is what repression gets you. These are people who won't come out of the closet already. These are people who won't admit that they have interests outside of hatred and fire and brimstone and division. These are people who don't have those kind of in their minds they do, but they won't be true to themselves. That's where I'll go.
I mean, and not being true to yourself, isn't that the source of a lot of just discord that, can't help but leak out into the world in terrible and vitriolic ways? And unfortunately, a lot of these people who are doing this are also people with power, people who hold elected office. And I just really wish they would keep it to themselves.
And are well-funded.
Or write it in their journal. They could try some journaling. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe scrapbooking like my wife does. We've got extras. Come over. She'll put you to work. No, but this is where the other part of this is. These are well-funded people because it seems interesting to me, Carolyn, that while it's a lot of the social stuff to keep people in line, we have a narrow view of how family and life should be. It's also the financials where a handful of people reap massive benefits, and it's interesting that those are the people who keep funding this stuff.
Yeah, no, these folks don't have anything better to do with their money. They could buy oligarchs' yachts or something if they really, wanted to have a good time, but instead they want to ruin everyone else's good time by doing things like triggering a constitutional convention of states so they can rewrite the Constitution the way they want. Because even though the Constitution, like in its original form, was like had a lot of problems, like I couldn't vote. If you didn't own property, you couldn't vote. And to say nothing of, how Black people weren't actually considered human. And so is that what they really want to take us back to? Yes. The answer is yes. They want to go back to the quote unquote fundamentals. I think they think that the amendments to the Constitution are problematic.
Yeah. And again, without saying it out loud. Before, this is how they got around it. Now they're saying it out loud. And now they're trying to inculcate all of their hatred and their division and their insanity and their religious zealotry into a constitution. I loved during the last, like 10 years ago, all we kept hearing about was we can't have Sharia law. And yet, here we go, Christian Sharia law right around the corner.
Oh man, I do remember that. Those bills actually passed in some state legislatures. Like in Oklahoma, I believe a court had to strike it down because you can't have a law that just singles out one religion. Or maybe it was Kansas. It's really hard to keep track over there. A bunch of Republicans
since you bring
doing
up
a bunch
Kansas,
of extreme things.
Since you bring up Kansas, tomorrow the big vote, will they put an abortion ban into their constitution? And I'm not sure where that's going to go. We'll find out if there is anything still wrong with the matter with Kansas. Any thoughts?
Oh yeah, Kansas is such an interesting state, and I feel like a lot of folks who don't live in Kansas or in the immediate vicinity don't actually know that they actually have a Democratic governor right now. It's wild. That's how badly Republicans mishandled Kansas when they were in charge. They ran it into the ground so hard that everyone elected a Democrat governor, and she's hamstrung by a very, very conservative legislature. The legislature kind of swung to the middle a little bit in the middle of last decade and then swung back. And the legislature has been at odds with the state Supreme Court for a long time because the state constitution in Kansas has been interpreted by the state Supreme Court in Kansas as protecting the right to obtain an abortion, which is why this ballot measure amending the state constitution is on the ballot tomorrow, Tuesday, in Kansas, and we'll see if folks want more rights or fewer rights, or want to, make sure women, like their governor, can't have the freedoms that they had, just the day before. So.
No, it's frightening where we're heading, and the abortion issue is just the beginning of this. And I've been saying this for, probably over a decade, that once that falls, once they take that right away, everyone else is in the shark. We're all in the shark tank. It's just a matter of, when we're flavor of the month, when it's our turn. And, you go down the list. I mean, the thought of contraception being on the table as something to be taken away, people would go, no, that's not possible.
Yeah, it is. If anyone has been paying attention to state legislative politics for the last decade, they know doggone well that it is very much on the table. And it was really actually nice of Clarence Thomas to say the quiet part loud in terms of other rights the ultra-conservative part of the Supreme Court is just dying to take away.
No, this is the thing. They're understand, and it's my view that these people want to say this stuff out. They want to scream the things that they've been whispering to each other in the closets. They want to come out and they want to all of the horrible things. They want to be the bullies, the misogynists, the homophobes. They want to be all of those things in public, and they want to be rewarded for it. And this is sadly where we are. And the rest of us had better wake up to that. That I'm sorry, when someone tells you who they are, time to believe them.
Yeah, and they've been telling us exactly who they are for quite a while now. And you're right, they were just kind of whispering, and it was sort of confined to the fringes of GOP-controlled state legislatures. But the fringes of those legislatures are now like speakers of state houses. Those folks are in charge now because the other slightly more moderate, slightly less bonkers conservatives aged out, got term limited out, you name it. They got sick of it. They're gone, and now the inmates really are running the asylum.
No, it's crazy, and until we and look, I come back to our problems aren't the people that are there. Our problems are the people voting for the people that are there because we put them there. The idea of somehow that Marjorie Trainwreck Green or Matt Gaetz represents the people in their district is somehow insane to me. But they're going to win their elections.
Yeah, it's pretty unfortunate. Matt Gaetz who is someone I have been paying attention to for some time because we were both actually William Mary Law, class of 2007. Fun fact.
I'm sorry,
but he actually hasn't won any of his primaries by an impressive margin. Like a good candidate could conceivably take him out, but he has the support of his father, who is a long-term power broker in Florida and has been looking out for him, obviously.
Obviously. You listen to the Rick Smith Show. We're here with Carolyn Fiddler. She's the political editorial director over at Courier Newsroom. Check out the work that they do over at couriernewsroom.com. Now, obviously, the big primaries tomorrow, everything everyone's watching, Michigan and Arizona. Crazy states. Some thoughts being that Democrats are pushing for the crazy of the crazy. I saw Representative Peter Meyer come out and complaining that, the Democrats are spending money on my opponent and they're going to be fingerprints on the gun if that person wins. Thoughts on the strategy of propping up the crazy of the crazy in the Republican primaries?
I confess I'm a little conflicted. On one hand, I think a little rat screwing is is not necessarily a bad thing if done judiciously. But at the same time, the prospect that some of these really extreme Republicans could get elected is absolutely terrifying. You mentioned Arizona with primaries tomorrow, and Robeson is, she's no moderate, but Carrie Lake is just way over there, and either one of them could become governor. It's Arizona is definitely very much a toss-up, and as nice as it would be to have a Democrat in charge of Arizona, that is not a foregone conclusion. And whoever wins that primary tomorrow for the Republicans is going to cause a lot of concern.
You've got to put Republicans in a position where they've got to decide. Do we want this maniac? Or do we want to maybe go for a third party? And I understand the calculus. But I also understand that sometimes it could jump up and bite you in the behind.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think there are going to be some cases in November where we all look back. Humanity looks back at some of the decisions that were made, this summer by Democrats. And hindsight's always going to be 20/20, and regrets will be had. But at the same time, there's no second place in politics. Democrats are doing what they feel like they need to do to win, and that's all that matters, really.
This, Carolyn, is one of those moments where I'm going, finally, the Democrats are balling up their fists and throwing a punch. I've always said, the Democratic Party, in a street fight would offer to hold your coat. I'm happy now that at least, it may be the wrong fight. They may lose, but at least they're fighting. At least they're trying.
And it's nice to see. I mean,
it's nice to see.
Democrats have been waiting for something to sink teeth into, for sure. And I think this is really heartening, even whether you disagree with the tactic or not. I think that a lot of the rank and file they're taking heart from this.
No, because this is, I have friends who they aren't the most informed. Let's go that route. But they're normal Americans
with lives who don't start their day.
Let's go there.
All the news websites.
Let's go there. They're drawn towards the person who looks like they're putting up the best fight. They're drawn to the person who looks like they're standing up for them. And Democrats have always been the ones who let's work out a deal, let's good governance, let's come to an agreement. Always trying to find compromise. I'm tired of seeing that. I want someone who's going to say, no, this is what we believe in it. This is what we're fighting for, and pushing forward.
Yeah, I think that was a takeaway of the immediate post-Trump election, just months and year. Democrats were suddenly fighting, and all voters who were not Trump supporters took a lot of heart from that, and it really excited a lot of low propensity voters, and we saw that at the ballot box in 2017 in places like Virginia, and then in 2018. And that was because, I think in large part, it wasn't just anti-Trump. It was that Democrats were just fighting as harder than they had in a really, really long time. And it was impossible to miss. And voters saw that and were energized by it.
No, it's what we need. It's that kind of passion that you have to have, that belief. And a platform helps. I think a platform would really help. Fighting for workers, fighting for minimum wage increases, fighting for things that are going to make lives better. I think right now, and look, I'm looking at this PACT Act, and I can't get this out of my head. This is something that Democrats should be just strangling the Republicans over. The fact that you've got, Pat Toomey, my senator, and Holly and Cruz fist bumping over denying veterans health care is disgraceful. They should be beating them daily with this.
I'm so old. I remember when people wanted to know why Democrats didn't love the troops. But
Wow.
that was a long time ago.
You are old.
Noun, verb, 9/11. A lot of people don't get that joke anymore.
No. So let me ask you this then, since you brought up 9/11. Now I got to ask it. Did you attend the big golf outing this past week, the Saudi golf outing?
No.
Only a bucket ticket. You could have gotten cheap tickets on StubHub, a bucket ticket. You could have been there. You might even be able to tee off from the former president's dead wife's grave.
You know what? I spent my weekend at a winery doing a murder mystery with some friends. A much better time was had, I believe.
Oh, there you go. I think that's probably better than the golf outing. Celebrating chopping up a journalist. Okay.
And for the record, I didn't do the murder in the murder mystery.
I would hope not.
But we do know who did the murder of Khashoggi, and it was Saudi Arabia. And yes, and the fact that Trump is propping them up, and other properties are propping them up is it's disgusting.
Yeah, Mr. Bonesaw's golf tournament. Sad stuff. But
that's some tricky branding, I feel like. Tough to sell.
Where do you go with that? Where do you go from there? But Carolyn, I appreciate the time. As great stuff. I hope folks will check out the website, couriernewsroom.com. You guys do amazing work. I appreciate it. Hope you'll come back and talk to us again real soon.
I would love to. Thank you for having me.
Good stuff. Carolyn Fiddler, she is the political editorial director there at Courier Newsroom. Again, couriernewsroom.com. I'm going to take a quick break. Right back with your thoughts. 1-866-416-RICK. 1-866-416-7425. This is The Rick Smith Show. We're working people on the top. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1917. Frank Little, an activist for the industrial workers of the world, or Wobblies, was lynched near Butte, Montana. His beaten body was found hung off a railroad trestle. On it was pinned a disturbing note. It read, quote, "Others take notice. First and last warning. 3777 LDCSSWT. The numbers were the measurement of a grave. Each letter was the initial of a union organizer. The letter L for Frank Little was circled. The warning was clear. Union organizers leave town or die. Butte was copper mining country, and efforts to unionize the miners had turned the area into a battleground. Frank had arrived that July to help in the efforts to support striking miners. Frank Little was a leader of the IWW with experience organizing free speech campaigns, lumberjacks, and miners. Although not much is known of his early life, it is thought his mother was Cherokee and his father was a Quaker. He organized the wives of the miners to join in the pickets and helped build solidarity between the multiple unions that organized in the area. The Anaconda Mining Company took note of his presence, but could not find a legal means to stop him. Then, early on that fateful day, men came to his boarding house. They claimed they were police officers. They gagged Little and stuffed him into a car. They beat him and drug him through part of town tied to the car bumper. And it was at the county line where they hung Frank Little's body. News of the atrocity spread far and wide. Thousands attended the funeral. Not surprisingly, the authorities never found his murderers. Some doubt they ever tried. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at laborhistoryin2.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
So, as we were saying, the big question, Kansas. What's going to happen with this constitutional amendment? Are they going to ban reproductive rights in their constitution and say, no, sorry. No, you can never have an abortion. No for you, woman. And I find it interesting. The arguments that are now coming up. Now, remember, as we've been saying, they're now emboldened to say the crazy stuff out loud. They're now, all the stuff that they've been ruminating in between the ears, between the temples, they've been dreaming of, fantasizing of. All those arguments, they go, oh, this is just too crazy. Nobody would ever buy it. I shouldn't say it. Now they're going, oh yeah, say it. Say it. Say it. The little voice on their shoulder going, yeah, go ahead. Someone will believe it. Someone will buy it. In that, I look at Chris Pratt. Chris Pritt, I believe his name is. He owns Pritt Law in West Virginia. Evidently, he's argued that they should eliminate child support for the parents who get the custody of a child. No child support. Sorry, no child support. And the argument goes kind of like this. By having a child support mechanism, it's going to make men force women to have abortions and make them do all kinds of things that, to get rid of the because men won't want to pay and would make women's lives miserable. This is kind of what I get. He says, quote, if she carries through the pregnancy, he's going to have possibly some sort of child support obligation. And so what he wants to do, he wants to, in a sense, encourage her to go and find a way to get an abortion because he knows that a certain individual, if he has any kind of familiarity with her, he knows that she might be in such a state of mind, she must be in a vulnerable such position that it's not worth everything he's going to put me through to carry this pregnancy forward. It's going to be easier. It's going to be better for me to just go and terminate this life. So she goes over to Virginia or to some other state where she goes and gets the abortion. So he says, I think that it's really clear possibility if we enact the Second Amendment here. I don't want to be doing anything that is encouraging thugs to go and get abortions. I have no idea what that rambling is. The Second Amendment part, is that a threat? Not quite sure. But the argument of eliminate child support because it's going to encourage men to pressure women to get abortions, that was how it was when abortions were legal. And you had deadbeats who didn't pay before. Thus the person who was my sperm donor that I don't know his name. This is not new. It's not going to go away. Now, here's my fear. My fear is once you ban abortions, this is the real fear that I have. That encouragement of, hey, you should get an abortion because she might want to, is no longer going to be there. And now he's going to go, no, I don't want to pay for this. Now I'm going to have to kill her. Think Ray Caruth, the football player who shot and killed his girlfriend because she was pregnant. This very real possibility. Thus, I think the reference to the Second Amendment, or this is just crazy right-winger talk, every sentence has to have a Second Amendment reference. I don't know. But, it seems to me by having it safe and legal and hopefully rare, that you don't get into this situation. But I'm interested. I find the argument interesting that he's going to make it. We should just do away with child support. Now, understand, we've already got a situation where women are struggling to raise children with no income. I think of my mother. We lived in poverty conditions because of a deadbeat. I'm all in favor of going and finding those guys and throwing them in jail. That's not what he's talking about. He's talking just, hey, no, just, let him go. Not advocating for social policy to help, not advocating for any of that. Just let them go. Now, again, this is a lawyer making his argument for a client, I assume. This is the linguistic gymnastics that you have to do to get your client off of not paying for what they've done. I kind of get that in a sense. But again, this is the quiet part out loud because it's what they do. Love to hear your thoughts. Should we do away with child support? Should women be on their own? Responsibility for their choices? This is the rhetoric that we hear from the right. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Angry emails to the top, and I'm sure that'll probably get me a couple. Quick break, right back after this. Stick around.
So what was once the Build Back Better bill that was going to make a huge impact potentially with climate is now going to be called the Inflation Reduction Act of 2022.
Manchin and Schumer reach deal on climate bill. Russia slashes gas deliveries to Europe. Plus,
this is one of the largest, if not the largest, vehicle procurement in history.
U.S. Postal Service quadruples its plan to buy all-electric delivery trucks.
All of that quadruplication and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
Out west, the extreme heat comes with a side of drought. California has imposed water restrictions this year. It's gotten so bad, Disneyland had to change the name of Splash Mountain to Dusty Gulch.
Based on a true story, this is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, Lucy has teed up the football once again for Charlie Brown. Joe Manchin has claimed to make a deal with Chuck Schumer on a climate bill.
Yes, indeed. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer announced on Wednesday that he has reached a deal with obstructionist Democratic Senator Joe Manchin of West Virginia to advance legislation on health care, energy, and climate. The bill would raise $740 billion over 10 years through a tax on corporations and the wealthy, with $370 billion of that going to fund climate and clean energy initiatives.
That's great.
While some Democrats have expressed support for the surprise deal, the devil may be in the details of the 725-page bill, which environmental groups are studying as we go to air. Though Schumer and Manchin claim it will cut carbon emissions 40% by 2030,
that's great.
It also appears to include gifts to the fossil fuel industry to win Manchin over. One provision, for example, seems to only allow the approval of wind and solar projects on public lands if oil and gas lease sales continue, with millions of acres made available onshore and offshore every year.
So to get renewable energy, we have to promise to keep developing oil and gas.
Exactly. That means President Biden won't be able to halt new oil and gas leasing on federal lands if it passes. Schumer says he will bring up the bill for a vote within a week. All 50 Democrats would be needed in the Senate for passage, along with passage in the House. We will see if they and Manchin actually vote for it.
We will see.
Meanwhile, the climate crisis continues unabated. In Nevada, a third set of human remains has been recovered in rapidly declining Lake Mead, which is drying up due to the historic climate-intensified mega drought in the West.
To be clear, these are remains that were put in there decades ago.
One hopes.
Exactly.
In Albuquerque, New Mexico, drought has reduced the Rio Grande River to a trickle for the first time in 40 years. The Pacific Northwest is grappling with a dangerous multi-day extreme heat wave that has set new heat records in Seattle, Portland, and other cities. And St. Louis, Missouri, on Tuesday was hit with an historic deluge that shattered the city's single-day rainfall record. Some areas saw at least 12 inches of rain in mere hours, which triggered deadly flash flooding, requiring hundreds of water rescues across the area. Meteorologist Bob Henson of Yale Climate Connection says, quote, record rain in St. Louis is what climate change looks like.
Everything is fine.
In other news, in Europe, to the surprise of no one, Russia's state-owned energy giant Gazprom has announced it will slash gas pipeline deliveries to Europe to just 20% of normal capacity. EU leaders say Russia is using energy blackmail to splinter the coalition's united opposition to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Russia's squeeze play has intensified global competition for fossil gas supplies, pushing up prices everywhere. Of course, prices were already surging due to skyrocketing demand during multiple concurrent heat waves across the Northern Hemisphere. But there is a bit of good news. Public pressure has forced the U.S. Postal Service to backtrack on its controversial plan to replace its ancient gas-guzzling delivery trucks with new gas-guzzling delivery trucks. Originally, the Postal Service said it would electrify only 10% of the 165,000 vehicles to be replaced. But after a massive public pressure campaign by everyday Americans and environmental groups, the Postal Service now says at least 40% of the trucks will be all all electric. And that matters for climate change because these delivery trucks will be used for decades. And it also matters for cleaning up neighborhood air pollution. On a recent broadcast, attorney Adrian Martinez of nonprofit environmental law firm Earth Justice said electrifying 40% of the fleet is not enough, but they will continue to push the Postal Service to go to 100%.
And this public pressure is working. You still got a long way to go with them, but it shows you that the more you weigh in, the more you can make progress.
Keep up the pressure. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com.
Are you tired of think tank approved corporate news and commentary? Are you tired of CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So I got a lot of response last week in talking about the guy running for governor here in Pennsylvania and his association with the CEO of Gab, and the talk of, hey, we need to be Christians and get rid of those feminine Christians like Mike Pence. We need to fight and win, and repent, you others. It's really crazy kind of talk and insanity that surrounds this Mastriano character, and the fact that he has a secret. Not sure who he would appoint as Secretary of State. I keep saying it would probably be someone like the Pillow Guy. Could be someone from the Trump administration. There are a bunch of names being thrown around. But here to share some thoughts on that, because look, I'm expecting someone crazy or even crazier than crazy. But here to share some thoughts, I've asked my good friend J.J. Abbott to come share some thoughts. He's the Executive Director of Commonwealth Communications. You can check out the website, vote.pa. I highly suggest, remember, vote. J.J., thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks, Rick. Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
So the big secret, Secretary of State, are we surprised by this?
I don't think we're totally surprised. I think Senator Mastriano has a relatively strong track record of making these proclamations and then not backing them up with any sort of details. And so, the Huffington Post reported this week, but it's something that a lot of journalists have been talking about, which is that, the Pennsylvania governor, which is unique to a lot of other governors in the country, gets to directly appoint the Secretary of State. And there are no specific qualifications for that job. It merely needs to be confirmed by the Senate. And, right now, Republicans have a pretty significant majority there. And there's a lot of Republicans that agree with Mastriano in the legislature. So Doug Mastriano could appoint literally anyone to be the Secretary of State. And the Secretary of State has really broad powers in Pennsylvania. They oversee election. They implement a lot of election law by regulation as well, and provide support or not to the 67 counties that administer elections. So the stakes of that appointment is one of the biggest factors in the election overall. And so candidate Mastriano has been going around saying that he has a secret agreement with an unknown person to be his Secretary of State. And he will not tell the voters or the public who that is. And so there are some figures around Mastriano that would be really disturbing in that role. There's his some of his campaign staff. There's other folks that he's associated with. But I think what's even scarier is that he could appoint someone who's actually quite competent. And that person could really dismantle a lot of administrative things that are in place to protect voters and to protect people's voting rights. And so, and then that's just one of almost 24 cabinet positions. Doug Mastriano would have to appoint the Secretary of Health, He'll have to oversee the Secretary of Human Services, which oversees basically every benefit program in the Commonwealth. He'd appoint the Secretary of Labor and Industry, who would oversee labor law and enforcement. So the stakes of the cabinet are really something that we haven't talked a lot about in this race. And so I'm really actually thankful that Doug Mastriano is going around bragging about his secret appointment for Secretary of State, because it really, I think, elevates the conversation about who would Doug Mastriano surround himself with in his cabinet. And, you know, usually with a governor, that's the people that they've surrounded themselves with throughout their career. And if you look at Mastriano's track record of who that is on a number of topics, from health to elections to all sorts of things, it's not a great crew of folks. So, you know, I think it's a really big concern, but it highlights just the stakes of this election for Pennsylvania when it comes to who is going to be the next governor. And so, you know, whether you're worried about elections or the economy or healthcare or taking care of vulnerable people, it's really important that there are competent people who are focused on doing the right things for the right people. And if there's not, you know, we've seen in the past that Republican governors in Pennsylvania can do a lot of damage on their own, let alone being paired up with the crazy legislature that we have right now. And so it just really highlights the high stakes of this election.
No, it's an excellent point. You know, I joke and I say, you know, it could be the My Pillow guy. I don't think it is. But you laid out an even scarier scenario, because I think the My Pillow guy is incompetent. I think he's a joke. But to put somebody in there who really is competent and who really is ideologically opposed to government doing anything as Republicans are, and giving them a hatchet to destroy our ability to vote, and with the stated goal of overturning elections and decertifying machines and decertifying votes. This is a scary proposition.
Yeah, it is. And I think it goes to also the point of, like, there's also a lot of people in the Republican Party who are laser focused on dismantling access to voting, particularly in a state like Pennsylvania that's going to be crucial in 2024. And so, if you know what Doug Mastriano has no proven record in government of getting all that much accomplished, but there will be an entire infrastructure of Republican operatives and think tanks and the people that have been helping write these election laws throughout the country that will be at the ready. They will be ready to help Doug Mastriano do some deep damage to our elections. But on the other hand, like, I think we should also consider that Josh Shapiro is running on a proactive agenda to make our elections more secure and accessible for everyone. And so there's a really, really stark choice here in this election. You have Doug Mastriano, whose both track record and future goals are to dismantle our democracy and to try to make it harder for people to vote and allow him to pick the winner if he doesn't like the result of the election. But we also have a candidate who has a long track record of defending our right to vote, who went to court over 40 times to defend the right to vote in 2020 and beat Trump almost every time in court to do that in Pennsylvania, and who's running on doing things like having same-day voter registration so that everyone, even if they aren't already registered to vote, they can go to the polls on election day, and if they meet all the qualifications, can go and vote. And so that doesn't just apply to Democrats. That helps every single person in Pennsylvania. And so, you know, this is a really stark choice between someone who's going to try to take our elections backwards, take power away from the people and give it to himself and a cadre of Republicans, or someone who's actually running to be more accountable by having more people be able to be engaged in the process. And so the difference is that the stakes are really high and the things that Mastriano could do, but also, like we have seen with Tom Wolf, that when you have a governor that actually cares about voting access and cares about making the democratic process stronger, that our elections are better than they ever have been in Pennsylvania. And so there's this false narrative that Republicans have invented to try to roll back things that have been wildly successful because they don't see them as benefiting them. But voters are really happy with having more access and having more security. And so if we can elect someone like Josh Shapiro, we can throw away all of this craziness of Doug Mastriano, and make our elections and our democracy even stronger.
Yeah, I mean, and you brought up a number of other things. For me as a labor guy, the Department of Labor being, important. And I tell my union buddies, the sad reality is if someone like Mastriano is elected governor, Pennsylvania will be a no rights at work state immediately. All of the horrible things that you see in other states that happen will happen here immediately. And this will be a much more dangerous place for workers and a much worse place for workers. And that will happen immediately. And I know he hasn't addressed it, but that's where they're going. They've talked about
So it's actually fun. It's actually interesting because he actually committed to signing a right to work bill. And he even bragged that it would be easy to do in Pennsylvania. And so, I totally agree with you. And Doug Mastriano is also one of only 7 senators who voted against a $9.25 minimum wage in Pennsylvania. And so that for all his talk about populism and about how he's fighting for the everyman, Doug Mastriano really doesn't have a track record that matches that. When you look at his track record, he's actually one of kind of the worst Republicans when it comes to workers and workers' rights. And so, you'd have not just a governor who would be receptive and eager to do those sort of things, but you'd also have a whole infrastructure of Republicans and conservative operatives who are desperate to do it and have wanted to destroy the union way of life in Pennsylvania for a long time. And so you couldn't be more right. I mean, we talk a lot about Mastriano's extremism and his sort of cultural positions and his sort of disrespect for the voters around the election. But when you dig deeper into his actual policy agenda, into his voting record, it's even worse. He wants to turn Pennsylvania into right to work state. He wants to. He said there should be no minimum wage standards at all. And then you look at something like public education, where he's pledging to cut per student funding in half. He said we should go from $19,000 per student to $10,000 to $9,000 a year. And then with that half money that's left, just let people go to whatever school they want. So this is a really, really important election where we need to be talking to people about Doug Mastriano's extremism on all the things that he is bragging about and that he has openly done. But we also need to make sure that people understand that, he's not going to stop there. He's not going to stop with elections. He's not going to stop with a woman's right to choose and to have an abortion and control her own health care decisions. Like, he will implement the right-wing fever dream that they've been wanting to have for a long time here in Pennsylvania if he has the opportunity to do that. And so, when you're looking at this election, it's really important in the governor's race, in the Senate race, and in our legislative races, that you take a look at what Republicans have done in their long track record of controlling the legislature, for instance, in Pennsylvania, and the kinds of things that they're pledging to do. Because when you get into them, you see a real divide between what they say, where they say they're for the workers, and the working class. But who are they serving? They're serving big corporations by trying to take away workers' rights. They're serving big corporations by giving them huge tax cuts and subsidies while blocking Tom Wolf's plan to give the lowest income Pennsylvanians a couple $1,000 to be able to deal with inflation. And so, there's a really big stakes on a lot of issues, and a lot of them are really at the forefront of Mastriano's own words. But when you dig deeper into his agenda, it's really quite disturbing on a lot of fronts. And so the stakes are really high, and that's why it's just really important that people are getting engaged now. If there's a way that you can give your time or your resources to help get people involved in the election right now, it's really important that we're all leaning in to do that.
Yeah, no, this is an important election. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show. We're with JJ Abbott. JJ is the executive director of Commonwealth Communications. Website vote.pa. We'll get links out on social media how you can do that. Now, I had a friend who told me he went to one of Mastriano's shindigs, and it was like a prayer revival. It was like this, and a creepy one at that. And he walked away from it with this fear of having a religious zealot cult. He called him a religious zealot cult leader at the top of the state, and it just gave me this kind of weird, eerie feeling that it's possible that this guy could be leading us in very scary places where we're going to cut education in half, where we're going to make workers less safe, where we're going to force women into horrible situations, where we're going to limit children's opportunities, where healthcare is going to be non-existent for a large number of people. I mean, the list of horrible is boundless.
That's right. The stakes are really high, and the priorities of the Pennsylvania Republican Party seem to get worse and worse each year. But I think on the flip side of that is that we also have this historic opportunity to make Harrisburg better. And I think and this is really why it's so important that we're starting to have conversations with voters now, because voters are dejected, right? They're tired of the division, and they're tired of feeling like these big corporations and these powerful people get all of the benefits, and they're left trying to scrape things together just to get by. But the reality is that there's really only one group of people in Harrisburg that are focused on that. And then you have a Republican Party that's been in charge for 25 years in the legislature. And look at the things that they've either blocked or failed to do or made even worse. And when you look at someone like Doug Mastriano, he's been in the legislature for 3 years. How often do the rest of the Republicans vote with Doug Mastriano? 95% of the time. So we have an opportunity here in Pennsylvania. We have new fair maps, particularly in the state house. We have a great candidate for governor in Josh Shapiro. And if we can get people organized and get them out and vote and understand the differences between these candidates and the stakes of the election, we can also inspire more people to get engaged around the process and believe that we can make things better. Yes, we can stop all of the bad things that the Republican Party and Doug Mastriano want to do in Pennsylvania, but we can also elect champions who are going to try to make it easier for workers to get by, try to make it safer for workers when they go to work, make it easier for kids to get a quality education or have access to the health care that they need. And so, we need to all lean in right now, and it's very heavy. Everything that they are trying to do is bad, and that's part of their strategy. They want to divide us. They want to try to make us depressed about the state of the world. But we got to all sort of lean in and really try to get motivated by the fact that not only can we stop them from doing these things, but we can actually elect people that will do the right things. And that's an opportunity that we really have this year in Pennsylvania. Amen. And a lot of swing states across the country.
No, good stuff. Lastly, I wanted to get to this Senate Bill 106. That's would amend the state constitution to read, "This constitution does not grant the right to taxpayer-funded abortions or any other right related to abortion," basically banning abortion for women in this state. Currently not in the Constitution. They want to add this to our Constitution, taking rights away from folks. I find this amazing.
It is really remarkable to think that the best thing that the legislature could come together to do in Pennsylvania at the last minute of their legislative session is to use our Constitution to take away people's rights. The Constitution, the U.S. Constitution, was literally written here in Pennsylvania and signed. And we are now faced in Pennsylvania with the reality that the majority party, which has been in charge of the legislature for almost 30 years, is so desperate to ban the right to have an abortion with no exceptions, to make it harder for people to vote, to give them more control over who wins the election, and to take a massive amount of power and responsibility away from the executive branch and give it to the legislative branch, something that they have certainly not earned. And so this is another thing that really reminds us of the stakes of this election. And so, there is a very easy way for us to stop Republicans from being able to run roughshod over the Constitution, and that is to take them out of power. And so there are a lot of competitive races, particularly in the state house this year, that give us the opportunity to stop them in their tracks. This amendment goes away if the Republicans don't control the legislature. But more than anything, we need our leaders and ourselves as voters to be ready for this fight. And so last week, Governor Wolf sued the legislature to try to stop them from being able to do this. They are not following the rules set out in the Constitution to be able to change the Constitution. They are disregarding every standard of good government when it comes to putting this. And so Governor Wolf is trying to hold them accountable, but we have to be ready as voters. Like, they're going to try to put this on the 2023 ballot in the primary where most people aren't paying attention. And so we got to be ready. We got to come out and vote in every single election. And we need to make sure that we're aware of what they're trying to put on the ballot. And it's going to be a really tough fight if we get to that ballot. And so it's just really important that our leaders and all of us as voters are getting ready for the fight, because it's starting right now. And this year we have the opportunity to stop them in the tracks. But if that doesn't work, we got to be ready to come back and stop them at the ballot in May.
There you go. JJ, I appreciate the time, man. As always, good stuff, good information. I hope you'll come back and share some more with us as this continues.
Anytime. Thanks so much, Rick.
Good stuff. Our good friend JJ Abbott. Make sure you check out the website, vote.pa. He's the executive director of the Commonwealth Communications. Love to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you miss any portion of the program, make sure you grab the podcast. Wherever you find yours, you'll find ours, from iTunes to iHeart, Stitcher to Podbean, everywhere in between. Quick break. Right back. Stick around.
Think tank approved corporate news and commentary? Are you tired of CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
The most important thing, what JJ said, is it's the people that Mastriano will surround himself with. It's the people that he will put into all of those other positions. It's the same thing when you're electing a president. It's all of those people that they're going to bring with them to carry their agenda. And the one thing that I felt fairly confident about Trump is he would bring clowns and TV people, which is what he did. He was not competent at all. And in fact, I think they even admit now that no, we didn't maximize the potential of what we had. And they've said, we're going to come back and we're going to do like the Schedule F stuff that we had talked about. Had they thought of that at the beginning, could have been horribly destructive to our government, but they didn't think about it until, the end. Mastriano is not dumb. He's dangerous. There's a difference. And while I say, he's going to put the MyPillow guy in, I'm joking because I don't know who he's going to put in. I fear he puts someone highly competent, highly motivated, someone who does understand the system, understands its strengths, its weaknesses, its fault lines, and then seeks to tear it apart. And he does that in every single position that he appoints someone. Normally, Republicans are really good about that. The Trump administration was not, because of Trump's ego, because of Trump's demand for patronage, for loyalty. Mastriano's a whole different animal, which is why I've said from the beginning, I think he's a fascist. I think, and I've taken some arrows. You called him a Nazi. Yeah, I think he is. I think he's dangerous. I think it has him in the position of power in this state, with the kind of control that a governor in this state has, is horribly destructive. Now, there are some who want what he is selling. The total elimination of social programs, and the total elimination of health care for certain groups, and the total, slashing education, and slash and burn. They want pain and misery for others without realizing that it's them too. We are heading towards very, very scary times. And it's not just Pennsylvania. And the reason I bring up Pennsylvania is because, this is a microcosm for the rest of the country. The same kind of characters are being run in offices across this country. I just think Mastriano is in this moment, the most dangerous of the moment. Love to hear your thoughts. Email me, Rick at thericksmithshow.com. If you miss any portion of the program, podcast. Love to hear your thoughts. I'm going to take a quick break. When we come back, our good friend Bob Ney is going to be here to share some thoughts on, well, all of the fun, all of the insanity, all of the top stories of the day. Maybe we'll get some thoughts on the golf tournament. Back after this.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1917. Frank Little, an activist for the Industrial Workers of the World, or Wobblies, was lynched near Butte, Montana. His beaten body was found hung off a railroad trestle. On it was pinned a disturbing note. It read, quote, "Others take notice. First and last warning. 3777 LDCSSWT. The numbers were the measurement of a grave. Each letter was the initial of a union organizer. The letter L for Frank Little was circled. The warning was clear. Union organizers leave town or die. Butte was copper mining country, and efforts to unionize the miners had turned the area into a battleground. Frank had arrived that July to help in the efforts to support striking miners. Frank Little was a leader of the IWW with experience organizing free speech campaigns, lumberjacks, and miners. Although not much is known of his early life, it is thought his mother was Cherokee and his father was a Quaker. He organized the wives of the miners to join in the pickets and helped build solidarity between the multiple unions that organized in the area. The Anaconda Mining Company took note of his presence, but could not find a legal means to stop him. Then, early on that fateful day, men came to his boarding house. They claimed they were police officers. They gagged Little and stuffed him into a car. They beat him and drug him through part of town tied to the car bumper. And it was at the county line where they hung Frank Little's body. News of the atrocity spread far and wide. Thousands attended the funeral. Not surprisingly, the authorities never found his murderers. Some doubt they ever tried. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at laborhistoryin2.
When a golfer hits an errant shot that might bonk an unsuspecting spectator on the head, the proper cry of warning is 4. But what do they shout when they hit a bad shot that boomerangs and bonks the golfer on the noggin? Actually, this shot has rarely if ever occurred, so there's been no need for a warning shout. Until now. This spring, a small group of professional golfers, led by former superstars Greg Norman and Phil Mickelson, decided to turn the game that has made them fabulously rich into an unsporting game of sleazeball. They say they want to set up an independent series of golf tournaments called LIV to compete with the PGA, the Professional Golfers Association. Fine, pro sports should be about top-quality, honest competition. But there's the rub. LIV is not honest, not a sporting competition, and not even about golf. It's entirely about money. Indeed, callous greed. The LIV scam is funded by the brutish family of petro-royals who ruthlessly rule Saudi Arabia and have made the oil-rich regime a global pariah. Mohammed bin Salman, the crown prince who is the mastermind behind this multi-billion-dollar golfing scheme, is the same fellow who ordered Washington Post journalist Jamal Khashoggi murdered in 2018. But killing wasn't enough. The prince had Khashoggi cut into small pieces, packed in suitcases, and tossed away. Now his golf gambit is a blatant case of sports washing. He is buying the marquee names of a few dozen golfers for a sports spectacle, hoping to distract attention from his government's depravity. Hitler tried this by staging the 1936 Olympics in Nazi Germany, but it didn't wash. This is Jim Hightower saying, likewise, the Saudi Golf Tour won't wash off the regime's indelible ugliness, but 4, it will boomerang on the money-grubbing golfers selling their once-good names to it.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So you could have seen the Mr. Bonesaw golf tournament. The Trump-hosted, Saudi-backed LIV golf tournament at Trump's golf club. Could have seen that for $1. Evidently, tickets were going for $1 on StubHub.com. And hey, you could have purchased some swag there, some towels, golf carts, all kinds of other things, pimping the LIV tournament with the presidential seal on it, which, as I understand, is illegal. But that didn't stop the former guy from making a buck off of it. Also, I got to find this out because Trump buried his ex-wife there on the course. Was there an extra fee for teeing off on her headstone? I gotta get the answer to that. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on the top stories of the day. Maybe he's got some golf answers for me. I've asked our good friend, former Ohio Congressman, political analyst Bob Ney to come share some thoughts. Bob, thanks for taking time for us.
Hi, I'm not going to answer golf questions. Last time I golfed, it cost me $1 million in 17 months. So, nope. That was an expensive golf game.
I'm sorry for I really am sorry for laughing.
Oh, I'm laughing. It's okay. It's all right.
Yeah, because I remember the picture.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I went to Scotland and yeah, that was an expensive golf game.
Yeah, not a bucket ticket. Not a bucket ticket there. No. No. So no, I won't ask you golf questions. How about tax questions? Can you answer a tax question maybe? Because
I think I could. Yes.
The question about a tax situation, because Trump buried Ivana on the golf course. They're claiming this was for a tax break. How do you get a tax break burying someone on a golf course?
I don't know. I mean, I read the story, that they had today, but I'm not sure how that's a break. I don't know.
Evidently,
of course, you never know about the United States government. They've got all kinds of things.
Well, according to the article I read, New Jersey exempts cemetery land from all taxes, all rates, all assessments, all of that stuff. And it said that her grave, as such, potentially is is advantageous tax implications for the Trump Family Trust, which owns the golf business in a state where the property and the taxes are high. Her being buried there could be a tax break for him. But I'm wondering, how did he get to decide? Why would she? I don't know.
Well,
but
they maintained a good relationship, and of course, have the children. And I think they probably decided, the kids did, where she was going to be buried. But she is the first person to have been buried at that golf course, and the trust attempted, according to the records of the, it's called Publica, and it shows that the trust tried to designate the property, and I guess it's in Hackettstown, New Jersey, as a nonprofit cemetery company. I don't think it's going to be that way, though, Rick, because the course is 20 miles away from that part of New Jersey.
Okay.
And under the New Jersey tax code, if the land's dedicated to cemetery purposes, it's exempt from all taxes. But they don't pay real estate tax, cemetery companies. But I think it's too far away. I will, if they do it, they could probably have tax problems, which would not be new for them.
Yeah, that would not be new for. You're absolutely right. Not new.
Right.
Not a new scenario for Trump at all.
Mm-hmm, right. So I don't think it'll apply. They're trying to create a 10-plot private family cemetery.
All right. Well,
But here's the problem. I don't know if you read this, but he further amended the proposal after the 10-plot private cemetery, which could be a nonprofit, okay? He amended it to include a 284-plot cemetery for profit, for sale.
Okay.
It's already a train wreck.
Already a train wreck. But I also read that, where they buried her is only, a short distance from the first hole. And I'm like, are they, is this now going to be, they're going to sell access to tee off from the headstone?
You can't make this stuff up.
Cannot make this stuff up.
It's amazing.
It really is. I also want to ask you about the presidential seal. That's kind of illegal, isn't it? Putting it all over your towels you're selling at your golf outing.
Well, this has been the presidential seal. It's like the congressional. For example, we were not allowed to use our congressional seals either then or now. And as a former member, I can have a card if I want that says former member of Congress. I can use the seal, but you can't use that seal, current or former members, to raise money off of it. And obviously there was a question about that being on the towels, and then if the towels were sold or given away to people who paid to be there, then that's a problem. Now, he's done it. Here's the big question, though. Who then comes in to oversee that? The seal, Rick, by the way, on this particular event, I don't know about his other events, it was on the towels, the golf carts, what else? Well, almost anything, shirts. So it is against federal law to use that seal, which would be a false impression of sponsoring something approved by the United States government.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
Now, you can't go and sue him because I think the golf tournament's going to probably, on paper, lose money, but I'm sure the back door is where he's making all the money from the Saudis.
Right.
Which, on a certain level, kind of got to be looked into, no?
Well, let me throw this out here. The least covered story that I've seen in a couple of years, what about the $2 billion from the Saudi Trust Foundation? I mean, nobody has covered it. Yes, it appeared somewhere, but nobody has covered that story.
Yeah, where'd it go?
$2 billion.
Where'd it go? Did Jared lose it all?
No, it won't matter because when the Saudi Foundation made its recommendations in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, they recommended that the Saudi Foundation, it's this big flow of money they have over there to invest in things to make money for the kingdom, which goes into the pockets of the royal family. When they made the recommendation, they even recommended that Jared Kushner's company with Mnuchin, which, those two traveled the Mideast in their official positions, obviously. Now they've got a partnership, the two of them. They've got this company. And they recommended not to give any money officially the Saudi Foundation, and they were overruled by you-know-who, Mohammed bin Salman, Mr. Bonesaw, overruled them, and $2 billion in investments going in there. Now, here's the kicker. If the Saudis make nothing off of it or lose all of it, and I hate to misquote here, but there's some unbelievable figure that is kept by Jared Kushner and Mnuchin and their company, no matter if they make him a dime or they lose all of it.
Wow.
It's like multiple millions of dollars. I don't know, $30 million is theirs no matter what. They don't have to make them money. It's theirs the minute the money went in the foundation.
And no worry about being...
Where's that story been?
And no worry about being chopped up into little pieces and carried out in duffel bags?
Well, no, because they're not going to write anything bad about him.
All right.
You know what I mean?
There you go. Okay. Let's move on. I got a couple other things I got to jump into. I wanted to get your thoughts on Iran, saying that they're going to turn New York into a hellish ruins.
Well, I don't think they will. Obviously, Iran likes to say things, especially, with the new leader there. It vows to build nukes if it's provoked, and it's going to turn New York into hellish ruins. But Iran spouts off. They, of course, have gotten more radical. At one point in time, they had obviously moderate leadership. And then the deal that Obama had set up was allowed the first year, canceled the second year, and even Trump admits that he was, snookered by John Bolton. Bolton convinced Trump if he canceled it, Iran would just be eating out of their hands, and instead it made Iran more radical.
Gee, who didn't see that coming? Other than John Bolton.
Well,
and I think John Bolton wanted a war. I mean, I think that's always been his fetish. So,
he's never seen a war he didn't like. He now is publicly admitting he was part of, coups.
Because they're hard work. They're hard work. He puts in a hard work. That mustache does some hard work.
Right. And so there was the nuclear deal. And again, the first Secretary of State before Pompeo came in and and Bolton said, hey, you need to keep this deal. The centrifuges were rolled back. It was on track. Now, I know the deal could have been more expansive. You know, it could have went after missiles, et cetera, but the bottom line is that deal was recognized by us and our allies as rolling back the centrifuges. So now, you know, Iran's obviously out of control, and you know, they'll say these things, and I mean, they won't do it, but they'll spout off because the radical leadership was able to take over by saying, look what America did to you, all our problems and the economy and people starving is all the fault of the United States when the deal was canceled.
Yeah.
It was hard enough to get that deal, let alone once it was canceled, then you couldn't convince, you know, the clerics to go any direction except more radical.
Geez, that wasn't predictable. Also, I want to get your thoughts on Nancy Pelosi. Is she going to Taiwan? Is she not?
Sure, she's going to go to. She'll go to Taiwan, and I mean, it's just amazing the Chinese making statements, you know, alluding to the fact that shoot the plane down, et cetera, et cetera. And there was somebody that actually made a comment about shooting the plane down. I don't know if it was an official Chinese, you know, government person, but somebody had made that comment in the Chinese press, and it's absolutely amazing. She needs to go. She will go, and I think it's totally appropriate. Let the Chinese get as angry as they want to get. They freak out over, you know, the speaker going. They freak out over any official going to Taiwan. They freak out when the Dalai Lama comes to D.C. They absolutely lose their minds. I mean, they've just had their way so long. They only understand aggression, and I highly doubt they will do something unless they're completely out of their minds to the speaker.
And that's the question. How far out of their minds are they?
Well, you never know. I mean, they're this quasi-communist capitalistic society. They're a mixed bag, but I still would think that they might threaten, just like Iran's threatening New York City. I would think they might make these, you know, threats, or they'll do military force, etc. But at the end, I highly doubt they will do something to the speaker's plane. But I think that the speaker will go.
I think she has to go. There's no way.
Yeah.
Once those threats started coming, once the saber rattling started coming, once the warnings started coming, you have to go. Because if you don't, now you've created a situation where you're gonna keep having to back down time and time again. So you have to go.
You're going to capitulate to the Chinese, you know, communist premier. I mean, even Pompeo is giving Nancy Pelosi credit. That's something.
I
don't know if that's good or bad, but it's something.
Yeah, keep your advice. Keep your own advice. Because that commentator who threatened to shoot down her plane also called Pompeo a coward, because Pompeo was scheduled to go to Taiwan and he canceled. So that's an interesting little change.
Well, that
twist.
is a tidbit. Okay.
Also wanted to get your thoughts on the big news today that the president confirmed that a drone strike over the weekend killed Al-Qaeda leader Ayman Zawahiri. He was, bin Laden's number 2. Thoughts?
Right. He was the number 2 guy. He replaced him, and Zawahiri took over the leadership after bin Laden died. And of course, the president, talked to the country and about this and said justice has been served. And I don't think that he was taken out just to quote take out this terrorist. I think that not only was he a key plotter of September 11th, along with Osama bin Laden, but I think also, most likely, Rick, he was involved with something that was going to maybe be planned for the United States again.
Yeah. No, that's what I've been hearing as well. That this was an counterintelligence mission, that there was something in the works and this happened. But I do find it interesting, the difference of, you've got this administration who goes and takes care of this guy, but you got the former guy saying, we don't know who did anything on 9/11, and doing a golf outing with the Saudis. I just find it interesting.
Well,
interesting juxtaposition.
I was glad they released the Saudi report. They should have, but even Zalmay Khalilzad the former liaison, under Trump, he called the strike a validation about withdrawing from Afghanistan. You can still do things, and without being there. I thought that was very interesting too.
Good stuff. Lastly, I want to get your thoughts on Senator John Cornyn's statement attacking the president. The president was talking about the PACT Act, and he said, Mr. President, passage would not have been delayed if Senator Schumer had kept his promises. Good news is, despite his mendacity, it will pass this next week. Is this an admission that that they blocked the passage of the PACT Act last week because of they're a little butthurt that a deal may be done on the what they're calling the Baby Build Back Better plan?
Well, I think that Cornyn's statement leads in that direction. Toomey from your state, Pennsylvania, was on TV Sunday, and I'm listening to the explanation, and they said, well, it's discretionary versus mandatory spending, and it should have been in one category, not the other. There's no way to rationalize not giving the votes. Of course, I can't stand the cloture rule anyway, but not giving the 60 votes and then coming back and saying, well, it's okay now. And then the Toomey explanation is kind of juxtaposed to Cornyn. Cornyn's pointing more towards, retaliation because of the Build Back Better, mini program, and whereas Toomey was talking about the mechanics, quote, of discretionary versus mandatory spending. I would think it would be more of the Cornyn point of view of why this happened.
See, but even just for me, even if that were the case, you moved it from discretionary to mandatory, I don't care. It should be mandatory spending.
Right.
Every dollar of it's being spent on veterans. Every dollar of it's being spent to take care of the people that we send into harm's way, that we propped up as heroes. Take care of them. I don't get the.
What did they get out of it that's going to change with their vote next week?
They got nice pictures of themselves fist bumping each other on the Senate floor.
This was not smart. This is one you can't explain back home. I don't care how you try, you can't explain it.
Well, you don't have to, because their base doesn't care. It's that, we won. We beat those evil Democrats. Without thinking about
also, I'm sorry. I was going to say, let's also look at this, Rick. If anybody starts to want to become a fiscal hawk now, where have they been the last 14 years?
14.
Why start now?
Excellent point. Excellent point. Good stuff, Bob. I appreciate the time as always. Good stuff, man.
Thank you.
Our good friend Bob Ney. Make sure you call your senator. Make sure you yell, especially if one of your senators was the one who voted not to move this along. I would yell loudly, and then vote come November. Throw the bums out, every last one of them. Sadly, I don't get the chance to vote Pat Toomey out. He's retiring, but I'll be happy to vote for John Fetterman to replace him so that this kind of debacle never happens again. We're moving it from discretionary to mandatory. It should have been mandatory all along. Just my thoughts. Back after this.
Are you tired of think tank approved corporate news and commentary? Are you tired of CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out our website, thericksmithshow.com. So I got an email from Jeff listening on KTNF in Minneapolis. He sent me this article and asked how we should respond in the lunchroom. Evidently, this is a hot topic of discussion, and I don't know why. Again, this whole transgender thing, I don't know why it's a thing. I've said this before. In places that I've worked, we dealt with this 30 years ago. The person went away. They were one They were a guy when they left. They came back as a woman, and nobody cared. Nobody. Were there a couple of idiots who said things behind their back? Yes. But they said things behind their back when they were a guy, too. It didn't matter. You're never going to change the idiots. But anyway, Jeff sends this article, the Daily Caller. So take the source of what it is. And, Jeff, you got to consider the source. The headline, poll finds 62% of American voters think gender activists are going too far. What I find interesting is they go through and they ask these questions about Title IX and the changes that Biden is going to make. And it says, the overall sentiment among respondents that Americans are not on board with Biden administration's push to overhaul Title IX laws to include gender identity. And, they ask, how many people are in favor of this? And the numbers, 62% of people think that the gender activists have gone too far. I don't care. Lead your best life. Do your thing. Simple. But again, remember who they're going to be polling. This is a very conservative, way out Tucker Carlson publication. They go into this and they say, the vast majority of people are against this. I give them credit in being honest by saying 81% of voters said they had no understanding of what the administration was proposing. So I found it interesting that 62% think they're going too far, but 81% have no idea what's being proposed. And it comes down to, this hatred of pronouns and this hatred of all of this, and this that we're being forced somehow into these positions. And I've taken the position from the beginning of, I don't care. I'm going to treat you with dignity and respect as I would expect you to treat me. If you want me to call you a man or a woman, whatever, I'm okay with that. Because I want you to, I'll treat you with the same respect that you treat me. I don't think that's difficult. But yet there are some of our friends on the right, no, they don't want to be there. Not interested in that whatsoever. And have this very narrow-minded view that everyone should lead their lives like they do. And I don't think that way. Go do your thing. Lead your best life. Now, don't pull me into it. Don't make me have to agree with what you're doing or all that, because I may or I may not. And nobody should or should have to agree with it, but no one should be put in a position to where they get to dictate what other people have to do with their lives. And I want people to lead their best lives, but I'm looking at this kind of a story where they're putting out this narrative that all these people are gone too far. I don't care, and I think the best place to go is I don't care. I want you to lead your best life. I don't care. Do your thing. I don't care. I think where things may is where people want to dictate what you're allowed to think, what you're allowed to feel. Not in favor of that. But you do have to treat people with dignity and respect. You do have to treat people with some measure of humanity. Now, the one question that they throw out here is about sports, because Jeff throws this in here. Well, what about the sports issue? And this is a question that we're going to have to deal with, Jeff. It's for me, the idea of what do you do with transgender athletes? Should they be allowed to compete with women? And I struggle with this because as a person threw at me, should 7-foot teenagers be allowed to play basketball with 6-foot teenagers? You're talking about all these differences. Are we going to start arguing that? I don't necessarily have the answer there, but it's a conversation we have to have. And screaming at each other, I'm not quite sure is the way forward. Come from a place of I want people to lead their best lives. I want people to be able to have life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. I think we're going to be okay. But this is one of those issues, sadly, I don't know that we're going to come around to. This is what the right does masterfully, this divide and conquer stuff. And look, we're talking about a handful of people across the country that has divided a nation. See how good they are at this? How about we talk about wages, hours, conditions, how we make lives better, how we make sure that it doesn't matter, that people can lead their best lives and eat. There's an idea. Anyway, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Thanks so much for tuning in. You miss any of the program? Podcast, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Email, ricksmithshow.com. Thanks for being here.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com.